distinguished members and representatives of the Consumers Association of Slovenia and the European Consumer Organization, dear representatives of industry and modern mobility services, dear organizer, dear guests. It's a great honor for me to have the opportunity to address you at the round table, bringing together prominent experts in consumer rights in both national and European level, policymakers, representatives of industry and modern mobility services, in search for answers how to make our future mobility less polluting and more sustainable. Allow me to apologize for not being able to address you in person due to my obligations in European Parliament in Brussels, what you can see around. So, nevertheless, I'm honored that in this video I can point out some of the important aspects in our ongoing work in the European Parliament in the field of the fast-growing industry of a new generation of low-emission sans automobiles cars. We are all aware the polluted air is our silent killer. As many as 92% of the world's population live in areas where air pollution exceeds the limits which is still appropriate as a healthy environment under the World Health Organization guidelines. Over 3 million people die annually in the world of respiration and respiratory illness, which is a result of polluted air. I addressed this issue and submitted to the European Commission several questions related to the relationship between air pollution and respiratory disease. One thing is sure, member states alone cannot tackle the most pressing problem that emerge in the international context, as for example, the air that we breathe has no borders. Therefore, we need coordinated action on the European Union level as well on the global scale. At this point, I would like to emphasize that unfortunately many measures are not enough ambitious and fall well short of the commitments adopted under the Paris Climate Agreement. One of such unacceptable measures are, for example, extension of subsidies for fossil fuels, which represents a really great concern. Let me just briefly reflect on yet another outrageous affair. We all remember Dieselgate. In the past years, consumers have constantly been misled about the real emission from car driving. Car producers have been using defeat devices to bypass exhaust gas testing. This leads to emission results which were low in a laboratory but much higher when cars were on the streets. Outdated testing procedure do not take into account the real driving behavior, and consumers do not receive clear, comparable and credible information about emissions. In the debate held in the spring in plenary sittings about the approval and market surveillance of motors, vehicles and their trailers, and of systems, components and separate technical units intended for such vehicles, I pointed out that if the existing institutions were working, Dieselgate would not have happened at all. Obviously, the car industry has a very long influence in each country, so that control were not being implemented. Even the EMIS committee, which was set up by the European Parliament in order to clarify these affairs, concluded that supervisory authorities do not carry out their work at national level, thereby putting the interests of the automotive industry ahead of the interests of their citizens. I also highlighted it was unacceptable that the majority in the European Parliament has not voted in favor of the amendments that would allow the agency to be launched at the European level. I believe that by launching such agency, we could prevent new scams and new consumers' misconducts. Distinguished guests, I will now briefly speak about the latest developments on the European Union level. The draft report on the European Strategy for Low-Emission Mobility, where my colleagues from the Green Group, Bas Eickhout, is rapporteur, is very complex, as there were almost 500 amendments tabled on the Committee on Transport and Tourism, which speaks about the importance of the topic itself. This is the answer of the European Parliament to the low emission strategy paper that the European Commission has published. The main thing pointed out in the report is the Paris Agreement. If we want to comply with it, we have to improve transport standards, as transport is the most problematic area, and sadly not much has been done on it in the past years. So road transport must be the main focus in the coming 10 years, as there should be done a lot of improvement. CO2 targets have to be strong and firm, especially regarding cars and vans. We are very much looking forward for the Commission to publish their proposal on the further lowering CO2 emission from the cars. Also, the ENVI opinion calls on the Commission to propose the phasing out of direct and indirect subsidies for fossil fuels by 2020 at the latest. There are also tendencies to include the electric vehicle targets in the report as well, as in the eyes of the rapporteur, this is an important aspect. It's what are most important, that the European Union investments instruments are conducted for supporting the efficiency of the transport system in technology, neutral way, low emission, alternative energy from transport and low and zero emission vehicles. Of course, the crucial vote will be unfolding at the plenary sitting session at the end of the year, when it will also be very clear which amendments will become the most vital parts of this report and which will be rejected. I can only hope that the strong arguments will prevail and that amendments that protect the environment and our health will be adopted. Ladies and gentlemen, the trust of consumers with regard of testing can be regained only with improved tests, and if technology and technologically feasible for future Union CO2 standards for vehicles should also be measured in the real-world driving test. The electrification towards zero-emission mobility demands efforts for ensuring zero emission in the whole life cycle. Allow me also to put a practical view into a perspective, so I will conclude speaking briefly about my personal user experience. Our Slovenian office enlisted with the so far only Slovenian provider at car sharing, and I have to say that the benefits of advantages I see are plentiful. The system and the mobile application are user-friendly, costs are lower, in cooperation with owned card consumer protection and guaranteed. The only improvement I expect is even more developed network with a more available location. And I'm quite sure that this sharing economy is also one of the very important things in relation with mobility problems. Recent data shows that some users of car sharing, especially those living in the cities, have already sold their cars and combined the use of car sharing with the public transport and city bike rentals such as bicycle in Ljubljana. The future is inevitably changing towards smart networks, electric vehicles and autonomous driving. While such support solution may bring new consumer benefits, relevant stakeholders have to ensure that this car will be safe and the consumer privacy is respected. So, thank you for your attention and best regards from Brussels.